Stay until the end because the final tablet fragment I will show you may change the way you see Mesopotamian myths forever. Before we begin, if you enjoy this channel, subscribing now genuinely helps the entire project survive. The algorithm buries long-form history unless people like you step in. Your subscription tells the platform you want more investigative episodes about ancient civilizations, conspiracies, and the secrets buried in clay tablets. Take a moment to subscribe. It keeps us here. Imagine the world before humans were described as fully formed. Not the world of grasslands and scattered tribes, but the world according to the earliest Mesopotamian myths. A world where the Anunnaki ruled from their elevated domains and determined the structure of life below. These stories describe a time when the Anunnaki did not yet use humans to carry the burdens of labor. Their workers were not people. They were the Igigi. The Igigi were younger divine beings, ranked below the Anunnaki. They were often described as attendants, servants, and the ones responsible for the exhausting physical tasks required to maintain the world the Anunnaki envisioned. If the Anunnaki were the planners, the Igigi were the ones digging the trenches, channeling the waters, managing the agricultural demands, and maintaining the great temples built for the higher gods. For centuries, the Igigi endured their roles without recorded complaint. But clay tablets hint at a mounting pressure that slowly grew beneath the surface. Scholars who translate these fragments always point out the recurring theme of fatigue. The Igigi were described as tired, worn down, and burdened, not in poetic metaphors, but in direct, clear language that resembles the complaints of laborers rather than mythical beings. One translation from the Atrahasis text describes the moment their frustration crystallized. It says that the Igigi were digging out canals for the gods for thousands of years, the work never ending, the demands never easing, and the exhaustion reaching a point where obedience was no longer sustainable. These ancient lines describe a workforce that had reached its psychological limit. Think about that. The earliest writings of civilization contain a story where even divine beings can reach burnout. That detail alone makes this myth one of the most human in all of Mesopotamian literature. That might be why it survived. It was relatable. As time passed, the pressure intensified. Some tablets mention that the Igigi stopped appearing at their workstations. Others mention that whispers began traveling between them during the night, somewhere near the marshes and water channels they were forced to maintain. These whispers slowly became conversations. The conversations became plans. If you are enjoying this style of grounded explanation, leave a like now. It genuinely boosts this content to new audiences and tells the platform you want more episodes about ancient strange history. Night fell across the land. The Anunnaki, resting in their high chambers, did not expect anything unusual. But the Igigi assembled in secret. Torches were lit. Their faces were described as filled with determination, and one text says they were burning with anger. They marched together with synchronized steps until they reached the gates of the Anunnaki domain. This is where one of the most dramatic scenes in ancient mythology unfolds. The Igigi threw their tools into a massive fire. Their picks and their spades, the very symbols of their servitude, were given back through destruction. This act was not symbolic. It was their declaration of rebellion. Another line found in the tablet says that the Igigi surrounded the house of Enlil, suggesting not only a refusal to work but a direct confrontation with one of the most powerful Anunnaki. The courage required for that moment is extraordinary within the context of Mesopotamian religion. These were beings who knew the power of their rulers, yet they stood at the gates and refused to continue. Some texts describe the Anunnaki as shocked. They did not expect rebellion. They expected obedience, routine, order. Enlil, one of the highest gods, was said to be furious. But even he could not simply force the Igigi back into their roles. The rebellion had exposed a problem the Anunnaki had not anticipated. A system built on endless labor had a breaking point. During the confrontation, the Igigi made their demands. They declared the work unbearable. They described the tasks as painful, endless, and unfair. The tablets even include a moment where the Igigi flatly state that they prefer death to continuing their role. This is one of the earliest ancient records of workers refusing exploitation. The Anunnaki convened a council. This is described directly in the Atrahasis text. The gods gathered and debated what to do. Enlil wanted punishment. Other gods, particularly the wise, warned against it. Punishing the Igigi would not solve the problem. It would remove labor that the Anunnaki depended on. A new solution was needed. Here is where the myth takes a turn that has fueled centuries of conspiracy theories. The Anunnaki decided they needed a replacement workforce. Something that did not tire. Something that would not rebel. Something that would carry the burdens of the gods without questioning the demands placed upon them. This is where humans entered the story. The rebel voices of the Igigi forced the creation of humanity. Not out of love or destiny, but out of necessity. Humans were shaped as a solution to divine labor shortages. Whether taken literally or symbolically, these writings shift the entire mythological framework of human purpose. We were not placed on Earth for worship or beauty. We were placed here because someone else refused the job. Archaeologists studying these myths argue that the Igigi rebellion symbolizes a transition in early Mesopotamian society. As cities grew, labor systems changed. Someone had to explain why humans were suddenly at the bottom of a new hierarchy. The myth provided that explanation. It justified the structure and gave divine authority to labor roles. That is why the Igigi rebellion remains so important. It is not a random story. It is a myth that encodes a shift in human civilization. The decision to create humans was not immediate. Some tablets describe several debates among the Anunnaki. The process required a precise method. Materials had to be gathered. Rituals had to be performed. They took the lead. His wisdom was necessary. He understood both sides. He had sympathy for the Igigi, yet he also understood the needs of the Anunnaki. He began studying the situation carefully. He understood that the Igigi rebellion had exposed a flaw in the cosmic system the Anunnaki created. The hierarchy had been stable for ages, but the demands placed on the Igigi grew heavier each century. They recognized that even divine beings could only sustain so much pressure. His approach was analytical. Instead of punishing rebellion, he sought a long-term fix. The tablets describe entering a sacred chamber to prepare the ritual that would lead to the creation of humans. Scholars have spent decades debating the meaning of this scene. Some read it as a metaphor for early cultures experimenting with new social systems. Others argue it encodes more literal beliefs about the origins of humanity. Regardless of interpretation, the story is consistent. It decided to create a new form of life capable of doing the work the Igigi refused. One of the most discussed lines from the Atrahasis myth describes what ingredients he used. It says that he mixed clay with the flesh and blood of a slain divine being. The reason was symbolic and functional. Clay represented the earth. Divine blood represented intelligence, movement, and purpose. Combining the two would create a hybrid being. This hybrid would be strong enough to work and conscious enough to obey. Scholars debate who the sacrificed divine being was. Some tablets identify him as a god who participated in the rebellion. If that is true, it suggests the Anunnaki used the body of a rebel to generate obedience in the new workforce. In other words, humans were created from the remains of someone who refused to submit. That detail adds a sinister dimension to the mythology. It implies that part of humanity's consciousness is inherited from defiance. They shaped the mixture and performed a ritual recited by several attending Anunnaki. These chants appear on tablets in broken lines, but enough survives to understand the purpose. The ritual called for stability, endurance, and obedience. It asked for the new beings to hold the burdens of the gods without complaint. In Mesopotamian tradition, rituals were believed to activate the power of creation. This one was no exception. The first group of humans was created to be workers. They were described as capable, strong, and organized. Early human existence in these myths has no golden age of peace or freedom. It begins with labor. It begins in service to the Anunnaki. Humans stepped into the roles abandoned by the Igigi, and the celestial order was restored. At first, the arrangement seemed to work. The Igigi were relieved. The Anunnaki had their tasks completed. The world moved again. But a new problem emerged. Humans multiplied quickly. Their numbers expanded to the point where the noise they produced began to disturb the gods. This is one of the most repeated themes across Mesopotamian myths. When humans became too numerous, the gods grew irritated. The noise issue may sound strange today, but noise in ancient myths symbolizes disorder. It represents unpredictability, chaos, and the loss of control. The Anunnaki had built a hierarchical world where everything flowed according to their will. Human expansion threatened that stability. The Igigi rebellion had shown what servants could do. Now the Anunnaki feared a new version of the same issue. This fear shaped many later events in Mesopotamian mythology. Floods, plagues, and population controls all appear in the stories. The Anunnaki were constantly trying to maintain the balance they believed was ideal. They wanted workers, but not too many. They wanted obedience, but not unpredictability. Humans were useful, but they were also a risk. If you are enjoying the continuity of this investigative series, consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow and keeps long-form mythological analysis alive. Without your support, these deep dives into ancient civilizations become harder to produce, so subscribing genuinely protects the future of this content. As humans spread across the land, they built cities, farms, and irrigation structures. These were not inventions humans created alone. According to the myths, the Anunnaki taught early humans how to cultivate crops, process grains, and build organized communities. These teachings were not gifts. They were instructions. The world had to function if the Anunnaki wanted stability. The Igigi watched these developments with keen interest. They had been freed from their labor, but they still held a place in the celestial hierarchy. Some stories describe the Igigi observing humans with a mixture of curiosity and concern. They recognized that humanity existed because of their rebellion. They also recognized that humans now bore the burdens they cast aside. This created a strange dynamic between the two groups. Over time, humans began to worship the Anunnaki. Temples appeared throughout Mesopotamia, each dedicated to different gods. Worship was not just religious devotion. It was a social contract. Humans offered food, offerings, and service. The gods provided structure, knowledge, and occasional protection. This mutual exchange shaped the foundation of all early Mesopotamian cities. But the memory of the Igigi rebellion lingered in the divine realm. It became a cautionary tale. The Anunnaki watched for signs of similar unrest among humans. They enforced rules to prevent concentrated human power. They divided regions, elevated certain kings, and interfered whenever societies grew too independent. The myths describe a constant push to maintain balance. They, who originally proposed the creation of humans, often appears in texts as someone who sympathizes with them. He protects humans in several later myths, including the famous flood story. Scholars debate why. Some argue that he saw humans as an experiment he wanted to preserve. Others believe he felt responsible for human existence. Regardless of interpretation, he plays a central role in defending humans against harsh divine decisions. The Igigi, meanwhile, drifted into a different position within the cosmic order. They are no longer the exhausted workers of the early myths. They become watchers, observers, and sometimes messengers. Their rebellion reshaped their identity. Their act of defiance freed them, but it also changed the structure of divine labor forever. Some scholars believe the Igigi rebellion myth represents the moment when humans replaced supernatural explanations in daily labor. In other words, the myth reflects a time when human workers took over roles once attributed to lesser gods. The story preserved that transition in symbolic form. The rebellion also foreshadows later ancient themes, including divine mistrust of human ambition. Mesopotamian myths repeatedly stress that humans should know their place. Whenever humans grow too powerful, divine intervention follows. The Igigi rebellion taught the gods that workers can rise. That lesson influenced how the gods treated humans from that moment on. As human society evolved, writing emerged. Clay tablets allowed myths, laws, and economic records to be documented. This gave the story of the Igigi rebellion a permanent place in history. It also allowed future generations to interpret the myth in ways that reflected their own circumstances. Every era saw new interpretations based on their own struggles and systems of labor. If you are still with me, leave a like. Your engagement pushes this content forward and helps it reach more people who are fascinated by ancient history and forbidden knowledge. Part of what makes the Igigi rebellion so fascinating is how modern it feels. It reflects issues that appear throughout human history: labor exploitation, overworked populations, hierarchies that force people into roles they cannot sustain, fear of rebellion. These themes repeat across time. The fact that they appear in one of the world's oldest myths suggests they may be core elements of early civilization. Some researchers compare the Igigi rebellion to later worker revolts in real history. They see a pattern that begins in mythology and extends into documented events. Whether or not the myth influenced later social structures, it certainly captured a universal truth. No system can function indefinitely if those at the bottom are pushed beyond their limits. The rebellion is also one of the first recorded instances of a collective uprising. The Igigi did not revolt individually. They united. They coordinated their actions. They approached the Anunnaki as a unified force. That level of organization appears thousands of years later in human revolutions. The myth may have served as an early narrative that showed the power of collective action. Thea's role in the story adds complexity. He understood the consequences of ignoring the problem. He also understood the danger of punishing the Igigi too harshly. His solution was strategic. He found a way to restore order without destroying the celestial balance. Whether viewed as wise or morally questionable, his decision shaped the world. The creation of humans becomes the final act of the Igigi rebellion. It is the moment where the burden shifts. The story does not celebrate the birth of humanity. It frames it as a solution to a crisis. This changes the context of human purpose in Mesopotamian worldview. Humans exist because the gods needed them. As humans expanded across Mesopotamia, the tension between divine oversight and human independence grew stronger. Cities like Eridu, Nippur, and later Babylon became centers of administration and worship. These cities were not merely political capitals. They were places where the boundaries between humans and the divine were constantly negotiated. Rulers claimed that their authority came from the Anunnaki, which helped maintain order in a world shaped by myths of rebellion and control. The memory of the Igigi revolt made the Anunnaki cautious about allowing humans too much autonomy. Myths describe the gods meeting in assemblies to evaluate the actions of humanity. They observed population growth, behavior, and loyalty. Whenever humans began to challenge the stability of the order, the texts mention measures taken by the gods to reduce the threat. These measures ranged from curses to calamities. One of the most telling examples is the noise motif. When humans became too loud, the gods reacted. The noise represented more than sound. It symbolized independence, vitality, and the potential for disobedience. The Anunnaki did not want to face another uprising like the one the Igigi had staged. Therefore, they intervened early and forcefully whenever they sensed a shift in human behavior. Scholarship often interprets this pattern as an early reflection of class control. The Anunnaki held the highest position, the Igigi occupied the middle tier, and humans formed the base. The myth provided a divine justification for a system where those at the top controlled those below. Whether taken literally or symbolically, the story reinforced the structure of ancient Mesopotamian society. Humans were responsible for maintaining the temples and sustaining the gods with offerings. These offerings were not symbolic gestures. They were believed to nourish the gods and maintain cosmic order. The Anunnaki depended on these offerings just as humans depended on divine protection. This mutual dependency created a stable but unequal relationship. There remained a protector of humanity during this period. While other gods debated punitive actions, he often intervened to shield humans from the worst consequences. His role in the flood myth is the most famous example. He warned Atrahasis, the Mesopotamian Noah, about the coming catastrophe. This warning allowed life to continue and preserved human existence. Ea's sympathy demonstrates the complexity of divine intentions in the myths. Meanwhile, the Igigi transitioned into roles that distanced them from physical labor. They became more like celestial bureaucrats or intermediaries between the Anunnaki and humans. Some texts describe them as watchers. Others depict them as attendants in the heavenly court. Their rebellion reshaped their identity permanently. They no longer served as workers. They became representatives of a divine class that had resisted oppression. The relationship between the Igigi and the Anunnaki also changed. The rebellion forced the Anunnaki to reconsider their authority and their dependence on lesser beings. While the Anunnaki retained control, they could not ignore the lesson learned. Hierarchies rely on cooperation, and when cooperation collapses, the entire system is threatened. The myth encodes this principle in a dramatic, cosmic narrative. As early human societies became more complex, the division of labor increased. Farmers, herders, artisans, and administrators all played roles that mirrored the structure previously held by the Igigi. Humans became the engine of civilization. This shift reflects the purpose the Anunnaki intended when they created humans. Labor and productivity were central to human identity. Historians often note that Mesopotamia was one of the first regions in the world to develop organized labor systems. The myth may reflect this real-world transition. As tasks became more demanding, humans replaced earlier supernatural explanations for how work was accomplished. The Igigi rebellion myth preserved this shift in narrative form. Part of why the myth continues to fascinate people today is its timeless relevance. It deals with themes of power, authority, rebellion, and creation. These themes appear in every civilization throughout history. They shape societies, spark revolutions, and influence how people interpret their place in the world. The Igigi rebellion is not just a story about gods. It is a story about systems of control and the consequences of overreaching power. If you are still following the story and want more deep explorations of ancient myths, leave a like. Your support helps this channel survive against algorithms that rarely promote long-form educational content. The next part of the story involves a turning point in Mesopotamian civilization. As cities grew, rulers claimed divine authority by associating themselves with the Anunnaki. Kings portrayed themselves as chosen intermediaries between humans and the gods. This helped maintain order, but it also created new tensions. Leadership became tied to divine favor, and any shift in worship or belief could undermine a ruler's power. The myth of the Igigi rebellion helped justify this structure. If rebellion was punished by the gods in ancient times, then rebellion against a king with divine backing would also be dangerous. This kept early societies stable, but it also suppressed dissent. Myths, therefore, played a practical role in shaping political systems. The relationship between humans and the Anunnaki became more ceremonial over time. Humans performed rituals to honor the gods, often reenacting scenes from the myths. These rituals reinforced the narrative of human dependence and divine authority. They reminded people of their place in the cosmic order. In temples, priests oversaw offerings and maintained sacred spaces. These priests held significant power. As interpreters of divine will, they influenced political decisions and community life. The memory of the Igigi rebellion shaped their teachings. They emphasized obedience, duty, and the dangers of angering the gods. However, Some later myths suggest that humans eventually developed a form of resistance. These stories hint at moments when humans questioned their fate or sought protection from different gods. He often appears in these stories as a supporter of human resilience. His interventions reflect a recurring theme. Even within rigid hierarchies, there are possibilities for survival and balance. Archaeologists have discovered numerous tablets that reference the Igigi in later periods. Some depict them as advisors. Others portray them as fallen beings associated with night and darkness. These shifting depictions reflect how ancient people reinterpreted their myths over time. The Igigi rebellion remained a powerful symbol that adapted to different eras. The myth also influenced later traditions outside Mesopotamia. Some scholars argue that certain elements, such as divine rebellion and the creation of humans from mixed materials, appear in other ancient cultures. While these connections are debated, they demonstrate the widespread impact of Mesopotamian mythology. Humans continued to expand their civilizations. They built trade networks, developed writing systems, and established legal codes. These achievements were seen as extensions of the knowledge granted by the Anunnaki. But they were also symbols of human ingenuity. Over time, humans began to develop a sense of identity beyond their role as laborers. This evolution is reflected in the myths. Later texts portray humans as capable of wisdom, creativity, and righteousness. The gods still held power, but humans gained complexity. They were no longer just tools of the divine. They became meaningful participants in the cosmic story. Ye's guidance plays a central role in this transformation. He teaches humans essential skills and protects them during crises. His presence softens the harshness of the Anunnaki. It introduces a sense of balance, suggesting that not all divine beings support strict hierarchy. The Igigi rebellion, therefore, becomes a foundational myth that explains not only the creation of humans but also their struggles, ambitions, and potential. It shapes the worldview that underlies much of ancient Mesopotamian thought. It also serves as a reminder that power structures are vulnerable. When pressure becomes unbearable, even divine beings may resist. While the myth describes supernatural events, its themes are grounded in real human experiences. Labor, hierarchy, oppression, and rebellion are universal. They appear in every era. The myth uses cosmic language to describe issues that shaped early urban societies. This is why it remains compelling thousands of years later. As the story continues, humanity faces new challenges. Population growth, environmental changes, and divine interventions all test the stability of the world. The Igigi rebellion is only the beginning. It sets the stage for larger conflicts that define Mesopotamian mythology. The tension between divine authority and human expansion became more complicated as time progressed. Humans did not remain passive. They built irrigation systems, cultivated fields, and constructed monumental temples that rivaled anything the Igigi had ever worked on. These accomplishments demonstrated both human potential and the growing reliance the gods had on humanity. The balance was shifting even if the myths tried to preserve earlier hierarchies. As cities expanded, priests recorded astronomical observations, agricultural cycles, and political agreements. Writing allowed humanity to preserve knowledge independent of the gods. This was a significant step. The myths reveal subtle anxiety about humans gaining too much knowledge. The Anunnaki valued control, and writing empowered humans to interpret the world without divine intermediaries. The Igigi watched humans with a perspective shaped by their past. They had experienced oppression and rebellion. They knew what it meant to work under divine command. Some myths suggest that the Igigi felt sympathy for humans. They recognized the burdens humans carried and the expectations placed on them. Their rebellion had freed them, but it had also created a new class of workers. Over time, the myth of the Igigi rebellion became foundational to understanding why humans existed. It explained human suffering, labor, and submission. It also explained ambition and resilience. The rebellion encoded the idea that even those who serve can resist. This theme appears repeatedly in later myths where humans challenge or question the gods. As Mesopotamian culture evolved, kings claimed that the gods chose them to rule. This strengthened political authority by connecting it to divine will. The kings presented themselves as protectors of order. They promised to maintain cosmic balance, enforce justice, and ensure that offerings reached the gods. The myth justified their position and discouraged rebellion. But the memory of the Igigi's defiance lingered. It warned rulers that authority could not rely solely on fear. Systems break when pressure becomes unbearable. Leaders must understand the needs of those below them. This message, embedded in the myth, shaped early political thought in the region. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humans became strained at several points in the mythology. The flood narrative is the clearest example. According to the texts, Enlil grew increasingly frustrated with human behavior. He saw humans as noisy, unpredictable, and difficult to control. The flood was intended to reset the world. It was a drastic measure that mirrored earlier responses to the Igigi rebellion. However, intervened again. He warned Atrahasis and provided instructions for building a vessel to survive the disaster. This act of compassion reflects his commitment to preserving humanity. They understood that humans were not the problem. The system itself was flawed. Destroying humanity would not solve the underlying issues. The flood changed the relationship between humans and the gods. It created a sense of vulnerability and dependence. Rituals became even more important. Offerings increased. The myths portray humans as increasingly aware of the delicate balance that sustained their existence. They understood that divine anger could bring catastrophe. Yet humans continued to advance. They created laws, established trade routes, and developed mathematics. The more they progressed, the more they resembled the divine beings who created them. Some scholars argue that the myth reflects an ancient fear of humans becoming too powerful. If humans gained knowledge and autonomy, would they follow the path of the Igigi and revolt? This question remains central to the narrative. The myth does not provide a clear answer, but it suggests a constant tension between control and freedom. The Anunnaki wanted obedience, but they also relied on human progress. Civilization required growth. Growth required complexity. Complexity created the potential for disobedience. In the myths that follow, the Anunnaki begin to fade from direct involvement. They appear less frequently in later texts. Their roles become symbolic rather than literal. This change reflects shifts in human society. As civilizations grew more independent, they relied less on divine explanations for natural and social phenomena. The gods remained important, but they were no longer the sole drivers of human development. The Igigi also faded from prominence. Their rebellion became a memory preserved in stories rather than a living event. They became figures referenced in rituals and myths, not active participants in daily life. Their legacy, however, remained powerful. They were the ones who challenged divine authority. Their defiance reshaped the cosmos. The myth of the Igigi rebellion also influenced later interpretations of angels and fallen beings in other cultures. Some scholars draw parallels between the Igigi and later celestial figures who defy higher powers. While these comparisons are debated, they reveal the lasting impact of Mesopotamian mythology. As time passed, humans developed their own philosophies, religious practices, and cosmic interpretations. They questioned the nature of the gods and the purpose of life. They sought meaning beyond labor and obedience. These intellectual developments marked a shift in human consciousness. Humanity was no longer just the creation of the gods. Humanity became a force capable of shaping the world. This shift is reflected in later writings that emphasize justice, morality, and human agency. The myths no longer portray humans solely as servants. They show humans making decisions, facing consequences, and influencing events. This evolution reveals a growing recognition of human potential. The Igigi rebellion serves as the foundation for this transformation. It introduces the idea that authority can be challenged. It shows that systems are not immutable. It demonstrates that those who labor have a voice, even if that voice is dangerous to those in power. As the story continues, the myth explores deeper questions about the purpose of humanity. Were humans created only for labor, or did they possess qualities that even the gods underestimated? These questions become important in understanding later Mesopotamian thought. If you are still following along, consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Your support makes it possible to continue producing long-form investigations into ancient myths and hidden histories. These episodes take research, time, and passion, and your subscription keeps this project alive. The next phase of the myth addresses the consequences of divine creation. Humans possessed qualities inherited from their divine origins. They had intelligence, emotions, and creativity. These traits allowed them to survive and expand. They also made them unpredictable. This unpredictability worried the Anunnaki. They saw in humans the potential for rebellion. The myth suggests that humans inherited the defiance of the slain god used in their creation. This inherited defiance became a defining aspect of human identity. It explained why humans were capable of both great loyalty and great resistance. It also explained why the gods often feared human ambition. Later tablets describe interactions between gods and humans that reflect this tension. Some gods show compassion, while others behave with suspicion. These conflicting attitudes demonstrate the complexity of the divine. The gods were not unified. They had disagreements and differing views on humanity. This mirrors human society. Leaders and groups often disagree on how to maintain control. Some favor harsh measures. Others prefer cooperation. The myths reflect these real-world dynamics through divine narratives. Human growth continued regardless of divine intervention. Fertile lands along the Tigris and Euphrates supported agriculture. Trade routes connected distant regions. Knowledge accumulated across generations. Humans became increasingly capable of sustaining civilization without constant divine interference. This gradual independence may be why the myths portray the gods as withdrawing. As humans grew more self-sufficient, the role of the gods diminished. They became figures of worship and symbolism rather than active participants in daily life. This transition is reflected in the decline of the Igigi as well. The rebellion remained a cautionary tale. It reminded people that even divine authority could be questioned. It also reminded rulers and priests that stability required fairness. Oppressive systems would eventually collapse. The myth provided a narrative framework for understanding these dynamics. The story of the Igigi rebellion also introduced the idea of cosmic justice. The gods recognized that their system had been flawed. Forcing the Igigi into endless labor created instability. Creating humans solved one problem but introduced another. The myth acknowledges these consequences, suggesting that even the gods must learn from their mistakes. As humans continued to evolve, they interpreted the myth in new ways. Some viewed it as a story of origin. Others saw it as a warning about imbalance. Still others viewed it as an explanation for suffering. The myth's adaptability contributed to its longevity. The next part of the story brings us closer to the heart of Mesopotamian thought. It explores how humans navigated their existence between divine authority and personal agency. It examines the rituals, practices, and beliefs that shaped early civilization. And it reveals how the memory of a divine rebellion influenced every aspect of human life. Human civilization continued to grow in complexity, and with that growth came new questions about identity and purpose. People began to wonder why they were created and what their role truly was. These questions did not have simple answers. The myths offered one narrative, but human experience offered another. This tension between divine intention and human reality shaped much of Mesopotamian culture. Rituals remained central to human life. People believed that maintaining harmony with the gods was essential to survival. These rituals reinforced the structure established after the Igigi rebellion. Offerings symbolized gratitude, respect, and the acknowledgement of cosmic hierarchy. At the same time, rituals offered humans a sense of agency. Through ceremony, they felt connected to the divine. Priests served as intermediaries, interpreting signs, omens, and dreams. Their role was incredibly important. They helped people understand events beyond their control and explained why certain disasters occurred. The memory of the Igigi rebellion influenced their teachings as well. They warned against defiance while also emphasizing compassion and responsibility. The duality of divine authority and human freedom became more pronounced as cities expanded. People experienced the benefits of organized society, but they also faced challenges like famine, conflict, and political instability. These hardships made them question the fairness of the world. They sought answers in myths, prayers, and dreams. The story of the Igigi rebellion offered insight into the origins of human struggle. As humanity advanced, they created stories of their own. These new stories built upon old myths but reflected changing perspectives. Humans began to value traits like wisdom, courage, and justice. They admired figures who challenged authority and protected people from harm. These narratives gradually shifted the focus from divine power to human excellence. Some later texts depict humans as partners rather than servants. They show humans making offerings not out of fear but out of respect. They portray human kings as rulers who must act with integrity, or else the gods will withdraw their support. These developments reveal a growing sense of moral accountability in human society. The legacy of the Igigi rebellion continued to shape ideas of justice and freedom. It demonstrated that oppressive systems eventually break. It showed that those in power cannot ignore suffering indefinitely. The rebellion became a reminder that strength and authority must be balanced with compassion. The Anunnaki, though still revered, became more distant in later myths. Their interactions with humans became symbolic rather than literal. This shift reflects the increasing independence of human thought. People no longer relied solely on divine intervention. They relied on their own abilities, knowledge, and communities. Some scholars argue that the myth represents the moment when humans took control of their destiny. The gods created humans to solve a crisis, but humans grew beyond that purpose. They developed cultures, technologies, and philosophies that allowed them to shape their own world. The myth captures this transition in narrative form. As the story reaches its final moments, the implications of the Igigi rebellion become clear. It is not simply a tale of divine conflict. It is a story about the origins of freedom. It explains why humans suffer and why they strive for more. It reveals the tension between order and chaos, obedience and defiance, control and autonomy. The rebellion serves as the beginning of human identity. It shows that humans were created out of necessity, yet they evolved into beings capable of thought, creativity, and resilience. Humans inherited both the burden of labor and the spark of defiance. This combination shaped every civilization that followed. If you have stayed with me through this entire deep examination of the Igigi rebellion, consider subscribing to the channel. These long investigations are becoming rare, and your support keeps this project alive. Subscribing tells the algorithm that viewers want real history, not shortcuts or shallow content. Your click makes a difference. The final lesson of the Igigi rebellion is not about divine beings at all. It is about the endurance of the human spirit. Humans were created to serve, but they learned to build, innovate, and preserve knowledge. They faced floods, famine, and conflict, yet they continued to expand their understanding of the world. The myth celebrates this resilience even as it explains the hardships of life. As we look back on this ancient story, we see the reflection of our own struggles. People today still resist oppression, question authority, and strive for better lives. The myth of the Igigi rebellion is not just a relic of the past. It is a narrative that continues to resonate because its themes are timeless. Human ambition, divine uncertainty, and the search for purpose remain central to the human experience. These stories remind us that every civilization carries the echoes of its origins. The Igigi rebellion is one of those echoes. It shapes the way we understand labor, power, and the complex relationship between creators and creations. In museums today, clay tablets sit behind glass panels. Visitors read translations of lines written thousands of years ago. Few realize that these tablets contain some of the earliest reflections on freedom and resistance. The Igigi rebellion, silent and ancient, continues to speak to anyone willing to listen. As we close this episode, consider sharing the video with someone who appreciates ancient mysteries and lost histories. Sharing helps the series reach new audiences and keeps these stories alive. The deeper we go into the past, the more we understand the present. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.